Hello everyone. I wanted to talk a little bit in this video about how to make your pom-poms removable. So I have put several pom-poms on hats, and to this point I had not made them removable. I think that for most hats, especially if you're going to, whether you're going to give them away or sell them, you should somehow make the pom-pom removable. First, let's talk about the pre-made pom-poms. So if you go to Michael's or Joann's or somewhere and you buy these keychain pom-poms, they have these nifty little, this is an elastic band loop, okay, that's attached to it. When you purchase them, and I bought these at Michael's for 50% off, so I only paid $2.50 per pom-pom. I can still make them for about 60 to 70 cents a piece. So this is still a lot more than what you can make them for. And then all you need to do, this little piece right here, see how that comes apart like that? So all you have to do is take that off, and here's your keychain, and here's your little loopy elastic loop on your pom-pom. All right, so one of the best ways I have seen to attach it, and this is the underside of my hat, is to get a button, and you want to make sure that the loop will fit over the button. So you want to try to pull it through and make sure the button's not too big or it's not too small. So see how it has to actually stretch to get around this button. So I think that's about the right size button for one of these pom-poms. So if you're wondering the size of this button, this particular one is about 3/4 of an inch. Anyway, you'll take the button, and I'm going to sew it to the inside of my hat. Now, I will tell you what this hat pattern is also, because I had people ask me that in previous videos and I hadn't thought about it. Before I get started, I wanted to mention I use, this is called embroidery floss. Okay, you can buy it at any craft store. This is Loops and Threads because it's from Michael's brand, and you can buy a package that has all of these colors in it. I don't remember what the price is. It's not terribly expensive, probably less than $8 or something to get all of these little skeins of embroidery floss. And this usually, I find, coincides a lot with the yarn color. So for instance, here's a pink that matches pretty closely to this hat color. And it's also very helpful when I sew on my buttons. Of course, yarn is very difficult to use and breaks a lot. So I find that if I go to the embroidery floss, and I use every strand of it, I don't separate it. I just use it like it's one large piece of thread. Okay, so it actually has 6 strands in it, but I just use it as one strand. So I believe this is the color I used previously to sew on this pom-pom permanently, and I'm now going to make it removable. So without further ado, I'm just going to sew this right in the middle of my hat, and I think everybody knows how to do that. So I'm going to sew it on, and then we will come back. Before we sew the button on, I just want to say that if you are making chemo caps, this button is going to be painful for chemo patients. So I would not recommend really even putting a pom-pom on a chemo cap, just because they need to be able to wash them frequently. If you make a slouchy hat where it's not directly on their scalp, and in other words, instead of a beanie, which is a tight-fitting hat, if you make a slouchy one and this is hanging off, that might be okay. And this would be a good option for a slightly slouchy hat. This would not be a good option for someone without hair for an actual beanie that's going to be close to their head. And of course, since I'm sewing this onto the hat, I'm not going all the way through to the underside because I don't want anything to show. So when I'm sewing on my button, I'm just simply going right through here, just like through the top of the yarn. Through the top of the yarn. Okay, pulling it through, going through the bottom, and then not going all the way through the bottom of the hat. Okay, so you just want to make sure your button is good and tight. So if you pull on it, you want to make sure that, you know, it's not going to come right off. I also crochet, so I have crochet hooks. Even if you don't crochet, sometimes it's a good idea to have crochet hooks because there are some embellishments such as flowers, curly cues, things that are really easy to do. You can also do a crochet cast on the loom, although I can do it without the hook, and I think it's actually easier without the hook. But then they come in handy for projects like this. So all I'm going to do is grab my little loopy-doop, grab this little loop, and I'm going to pull it down through my hat. Okay. There we go. And it's kind of tight. All right. So, pardon my dog. I don't know what he barks at all the time. Okay. So, I'm going to try to grab this loop and pull it around this button. There we go. Ha-ha. So, I'm going to pull it through this way because that's a non-hook end. So, now I have it wrapped completely around my button. See there? And now it's on top of my hat. That works actually really well. I like that. So it actually stays pretty good on this hat. It's not terribly floppy. If you feel of it, it's actually works relatively well. I think that will be my go-to for these pom-poms. Okay, so I talked about putting the already made store-bought pom-poms on your hats. But I like to make my poms, so I wanted to find a way to make these homemade ones detachable. And after exploring several options, I've decided to go with snaps. I bought these at Walmart for $2.97. There are 4 snaps on here, so they're less than $1 a piece, so that's not too bad. Okay, so you need to make sure that these are snapped the correct way because I did this backwards before. So, because they don't snap this direction, like here, that's not snap. They only snap one way. So I want the little button part to go on the pom-pom so that it's not sticking up on the hat. So I'm going to put this one on the top of my hat on the right side of the hat, and then this one will go on the pom-pom, and then you can just snap it on and off. That will also enable people not only to take it off to wash it, but if they wanted to get more than one pom-pom with a snap, then they could change the color of the pom-pom. I'm going to use my embroidery floss to sew on my snaps, just like I used to sew on my buttons. So when I sew anything onto the top of a hat, I am going to start on the underside, and I'm going to leave a little bit of a tail so that I can take this and I'm going to tie it to the other end. And I'll show you what I mean. Okay, so now that I've done these 3 stitches, I've done a stitch here, a stitch here, and a stitch here, I'm going to go to the underside, show you what I was talking about. By leaving a tail here, I can tie this, because this won't make a very big knot because it's thread. So I can tie that so that I can make sure it's secure and it won't come off. And then you can weave in the tails later. Okay. All right, so now I have a stitch from each slot to each slot to make it really nice and secure. Okay. Now that we have the snap sewn on the hat, I'm going to secure this little button end to the pom-pom. I'm going to use white since my pom-pom is white, and I'm going to sew this on. Okay, so I've got this. I need to cut my tails. It's slightly a little different than sewing it on the hat, obviously, because you can't go down and come back up. You just kind of have to go through this and go around. But once again, I have 1 stitch from each slot around so that I can make sure this is nice. See, this is tight. It's not going to go anywhere. If you notice that the hair on your pom-pom gets kind of matted from doing all the sewing, you can just take a comb and you can actually comb out the fur so that it looks a little bit nicer. Comb it on the top too. I like this. These kind of a spiky type of faux fur. So I'm going to comb it out if it starts to get scraggly looking. All right, so now we have the snap on our pom-pom and the snap on our hat. Put the two together, snap, and there you have your removable pom-pom. I like it. It's not too floppy. I think it's just about right. And I think that ends up working out really well. What's nice about these snaps is if you are making chemo caps, then they will not feel this on the underside of their head because there's nothing here. There's no knot. There's no, I mean, there's the thread, but that's way up above where this yarn is. So it shouldn't hurt their heads any. So snaps are a really good way to put on removable pom-poms that you make yourself. Here's a shot of what the finished pom-pom looks like on the hat with a snap on it. You can see it if you pull it back, but you really can't see it if you're just looking at the hat. One last way to make a homemade pom-pom removable. I am using, you could use the embroidery floss, but I would say use 2 or maybe 3 strands of it. So instead, because this is a little bit thicker, I am using 100% cotton yarn because it has no give. So when you tie it, it's going to be really, really tight. You could probably also even use regular twine like string or something like that. I'm going to cut off a piece. I have a really heavy tapestry needle with a big eye, and I'm just going to put it through where I gathered my pom-pom, one side to the other. Okay, just enough to get it through here. So then you want to even out the ends here. Okay, then all you need to do is take your hat and you'll have to find the right size buttons. I have these that have these really big eyes in them. I got this in one of those multi-packs at Walmart. They're a little square box about this big, and I think for $5 you get all kinds of different buttons. So I'm going to put a button on the underside of the hat. So I'm going to poke this through here, and this big needle will go through here with no problem. I'm going to put one side of the thread through there, and then thread the other side through. I had to take the button off again. So I've got these threaded through at 2 different spots, a little ways from each other. You don't want to put them together through the same hole because you won't get as much stability of the pom-pom. So then I'm just going to thread that one through that side. I can probably do it without a needle. This one will go through this side. And you're going to pull it as tightly as possible, okay? And then all you're going to do, if you have someone that can hold this for you, is you're just going to tie a bow because you want the person to be able to remove it. So then it's really nice and tight, by the way. And then you can, you could tie a bow because if you want them to undo it, you wouldn't want to tie a knot. So you could tie a bow like that and cut your ends off. Okay, and then they can just untie it. Now, this would not be a good option for a chemo hat because somebody will feel that. But if it's a slouchy hat and that's not going right up against their scalp, then it will work fine. And this actually works really well. This is nice and tight. And you don't have anything showing here like the snap. So you want to make sure it's either a slouchy hat or not someone who's a chemo patient. So if you don't have the buttons with the large holes, you can use embroidery floss. So these are 1 1/8 inches wide, I believe, yeah. 1 1/8 inches right here. And these are really light and super thin, and they would work really well for doing the tying the bow method. but you may want to use, because that cotton yarn will not fit through these holes, nor will a very large eye needle. You can use 1 or 2 strands. If you can get 2 strands through the eye of your needle, this would work perfectly, 2 strands of the embroidery floss. So once again, all you have to do is pull these 2 strands. See, I've got 2, when I say 2 strands, I mean 2 full strands, and each strand has 6 pieces of thread on it. So I've got 2 each side. Then once again, all you have to do is put it down through the center of your cap. Holes were actually big enough I could thread this through without using a needle, so that really wasn't that difficult. You want to make sure and pull it tight, but don't pull it too tight so that you end up breaking the embroidery thread. So just pull it kind of tight here, and then once again, we're just going to make a bow like we did with the cotton yarn. Okay, so now you have your bow and your button and your pom-pom. Okay, so those are your 3 different ways to add detachable, removable pom-poms to any hat.